Hello, everybody. Welcome to TLD Chat. It's Wednesday TLD Chat. I just realized that this little jazzy intro is quite appropriate this week with everybody in New Orleans for the online training event, I think, that's going on. I've been watching all of the social media posts. It looks like everybody's having way too much fun, and those of us that aren't there are suffering from a bit of FOMO, so trying to stay caught up with everybody online. So I'm guessing that's why some of our regulars aren't hanging out with us, because they're too busy having a good time in New Orleans. So anyways, everybody, welcome to TLD Chat. We are the Training, Learning, and Development Chat, and we're here to talk to you, or talk with you more appropriately, about training, learning, and development. And we have a fantastic guest today who I will get with in just a moment. And so it won't just be me rambling for a third day in a row. Yay! Oh, we should probably get some little applause for that. Thank you. Yeah, we need a little bit of having a guest on board always tends to keep Brent on track. So, Craig, thank you for the support. Gotta appreciate that. But yeah. Oh, we're yaying for me not having to talk to myself today, Craig. It's the way we go. And yay, Paul Buffler's here today too. Good to see you. Good to see everybody in the chat this morning. You guys are awesome. It's going to be a good chat this morning. And you know what? Let's just jump in and go ahead and get started. We have guest today. Oh, and I even forgot to ask you how I should pronounce your name. So I'm going to say Matt Meuleners. Is that right?
Yeah, you nailed it. First time.
Awesome.
Good job.
Awesome. Welcome to TLD Chat. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, cool. We've got an excellent list of questions, and I've noticed that people have already started voting them up, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what you guys do at Focus Training, which is mentoring, coaching, leadership, development type stuff for your people. And how about I just let you go ahead and explain it a little bit more?
Sure.
Give us a little intro.
Sure. So Focus Training is a leadership development firm based in Milwaukee. We have been in business for 25 years, and we tend to focus on helping organizations build leadership pipelines. So a lot of the work that we do is custom-built in-house leadership development programs, usually cohort programs, and we tend to target in at sort of the high potential transitions. So individual contributors stepping into a management role, managers stepping into an executive role.
Yep.
And try to keep it interactive. Flipped classroom, 6-month programs are very common.
Nice.
And then, as a lot of smaller shops do, we kind of dabble in a little bit of everything. So a little consulting, a little coaching, kind of whatever the client needs, that kind of thing.
Whatever they're looking. You've got a cool story about how you got into this industry. I always like to ask people, because everybody sort of, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of the folks in our industry tend to sort of just stumble into training and learning and development accidentally. So tell us your story again. That was great.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird. I feel like you're right. Everybody I know in training started in the business side, and then it was like, hey, you're good at this. You should be the trainer. And that's not how it worked out for me. Focus Training was my first job, only job. Actually started right out of high school. So in high school, I was really involved in an organization called DECA. It's a marketing and business club, and was so involved in it that I decided to run a campaign for international president, and I got elected. And so deferred my first year of college and traveled around the country speaking and doing workshops and things like that for the organization. And I got to the end of that year and I was like, I like this. I need to figure out how to get somebody to pay me to do this. And just so happened that the two people who would later become my business partners, Todd and Melissa, were out there in the circuit doing that training, and I met up with them, begged them to let me come work for them. And they said, sure, you can come work for us for free. We're a tiny startup. You can be our first intern. And 18 years later, here I am, never looked back. So like you said, when you check out the LinkedIn profile, there's one company and that's it. It's kind of random.
One job. You just stick with it because it looks like you guys are doing great work and being exceptionally productive in the industry. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we're having fun.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, we've got a bunch of questions loaded up. So everybody in the chat, this is how we're going to do this morning. Everybody introduce yourself. We've got 11 people hanging out here. Let us know who you are. Introduce yourself to Matt so he can get to know who you are. And while you're doing that, also check out the Ask a Question feature underneath the video. And be sure to vote up. Looks like, people have already been in there voting up some of the questions. Fantastic. Kim dropped in another great question. Thank you. So, if anybody is interested in checking that out, vote those up. I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. Well, not a few minutes because then that would get dull, but hurry up, get over there, vote these things up. I should have some. I should have had some on hold music on the soundboard here. I'm gonna work on that. Marco, good to see you. So I don't know, Matt, if you know, we've got quite the international crowd that hangs out with us on TLD Chat. So over in Europe, it's happy hour. It's breakfast and coffee time for us here, but over there, they're at the end of their day. So Marco Ficini joins us, and Bethany Taylor. Marco's in the UK. Bethany's in Scotland.
Nice. Well, that's good if it's happy hour. This should be probably a 2-drink minimum thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't. Let's see. I don't know.
Oh, out of the pubs today. That's too bad.
No, yeah, we Oh, nice. Are you streaming us live inside your VR, Marco?
That's cool.
Ah, nice. All right, get a screen capture and share with us. That would be cool.
Oh, hey, Paul, you're from Minnesota. That's where I was born and grew up. I lived in Minneapolis for most of my young adult life before I went off to school. Nice. No happy hours in Scotland. Oh, sad times.
What? Not allowed happy hours? That's the first time I've ever heard that. You should move to Ireland. I think they're mandatory.
Or Milwaukee.
Or Milwaukee, yeah. Yeah, perfect. All right, let's jump in and just start doing this question stuff. We're at 10 after, so it's a good time for us to just hit this up. So who needs a mentor? Fantastic question for us to drop in. It's nice and simple and easy. And Dana even dropped in a comment here. She says, everyone at every stage in life. I went through a mentorship program a few years ago, and my parents followed the process closely. Since then, they are retiring, and they're like, we need a mentor to guide us. Our vast options are confusing, and what do we really want to be when we grow up? Yeah, that's an amazing story. I mean, I think I think even something like retirement, people think it's so easy, but yeah, you could probably use retirement mentors, huh?
I actually think there's a kind of a growing industry or sort of a cottage industry there right now. I know a couple of people who have gone into retirement coaching. With the boomers on the way out, there's a market there. And
wow.
I watched my parents retire, and they said the same thing. They were looking for that kind of help. I think you could do good work in that space. There's people who need it.
That's a niche, Dana. Let's
check it out.
Jump into that. It's not like you're not busy enough. I totally know, but what an interesting gig. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, so who needs a mentor? So from your perspective and from your clients, and who comes to you, and let's kind of narrow it down a little bit. Obviously, I think that is a great point, Dana. Thank you. That everyone could use some mentorship and parenting, if you will, all the way through life. But what does that look like in the corporate space for you?
So what we tend to see is that I agree. First of all, everybody can get value out of a mentor. But it really tends to come down to some of the logistics, right? So in most organizations, if you're going to do an in-house mentoring program, that means you're working with a limited pool of mentors. And so you probably can't give every single employee a mentor, unless you're willing to go outside the organization, which is something we should talk about today too. So then you have to sort of prioritize. And one of the best ways to prioritize is to start with figuring out who actually wants a mentor, because at different stages in different people's lives, they may be more or less excited about that idea. And some of that has to be mitigated by, are you educated about the value of a mentor? So if you know why they can be good and what a mentorship really is, if you then want it, then probably that should put you near the front of the queue. But if you're not interested, mentorship is really a relationship. So if both parties aren't interested, it's not going to be very successful, and probably not worth the effort to support from an organizational level. A lot of folks, I think, look at mentors from a career development standpoint as something for people earlier in their career, or people that have been identified as high potential. I don't know if that's necessarily the universal rule. But again, if you're working with scarcity of mentors, I think that's a good place to start. You want to invest in people you believe are going to stick around, that you believe are going to continue in the leadership track. Everybody can get benefit out of it, but I do think that the goal of a mentor is a little more focused on future and next step kind of development, whereas a coach would be more about helping you be successful now in your current role. So if you're not looking to advance, if you're not looking to move on, you may not need a mentor in the same way that somebody else does.
That's a great way to think about it. I hadn't actually thought about it like that, but yeah. So, because we throw around those terms pretty readily, and we like to talk semantics around here quite a bit, because there are a lot of words that get thrown around that we don't have definitions for just yet, or everybody has a different definition for it. But and that makes a lot of sense to me. But maybe we can drill down on it a little bit more, the difference between a coach and a mentor. So would somebody ever have both and each one be a different person, perhaps?
Yeah, I think, in fact, that's kind of the best case scenario in my mind, if we're defining them the way that I just did. So certainly a mentor, if they're going to be really effective, is going to reach into that coaching toolbox from time to time. They're going to do some coaching in their role as a mentor. But I do think that frequently coaching, the role of a coach should be a manager, right? My supervisor ideally should be the person who's coaching me on a regular basis. Or some organizations have the resources or set up to do that as another person, right? Maybe you have a sales manager, but you also have a roving sales coach who's going to pop in and support people and work on their skills. But again, I think the primary difference in my mind between a mentor and a coach is that the mentor is thinking about future focused, what's next kinds of things for me, right? What we would probably consider development. And a coach is thinking about immediate skill sets, performance, rather than potential. So how do I, the baseball analogy is an easy one, right? My batting coach is focused on making sure when I get up next, I don't swing at a low-hanging curve. I don't know anything about baseball, so that's probably not a good example. But whereas my agent,
it sounded good to me.
Yeah, so somebody that's going to show up on the feed, I'm sure. But but my agent is worried about getting me into the majors, right? And so that person is mentoring me, whereas my batting coach is working on my immediate skill set, and they interweave plenty, right? I have to be good at my job to catapult me into that next level. But my batting coach is not really thinking about that. They don't care about getting me to the majors. They care about my batting average today.
Yeah, I like to think that we kind of help people, or we try to help people do both here. Which is why I asked us to dig in a little bit deeper. It's easy for us to kind of brush across the top of some of these conversations that we have every single day here on TLD Chat, but I like to get down into the weeds a little bit and do a little bit more detail work, or, around what exactly does this stuff mean to a training and learning and development professional? I mean, I think most of the folks that are here, and maybe this would be a good poll for me to put in. I won't do an official poll using the system, but just in the chat, it would be interesting to hear how many of you focus as part of your job, do any sort of management, leadership, like development. Either you develop courses in that area, or you have in the past, or you're currently working on one, or that's your main job, and that's what you do. I'd be really curious to know, how that works, because I think we all see so much variety in this space, as far as how we approach this, and what does an effective management leadership program look like, right? I mean, and it's easy for us, I guess, well, maybe not easy, but to talk about this stuff, but putting it together and making it happen effectively, I think, is a lot harder. And it's a lot harder than just formalizing it, right? I remember when I was working at Intel, they had a really formal process, and you signed up for a mentor, and you got to choose one out of a bunch of different people, and it was very formalized, and you had to meet on a certain regular basis, and there was a certain set of questions and things that you had to do, right, and go through, and it just never really stuck. And I always liked the idea more of yes, I want a mentor, but I want to wait until I kind of find the right person. It's like dating, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like I don't want to just fill out a form and get married. I want to wait till I find the right person, and then go through all of it, right?
Yeah, this is one of the real struggles, I think, with doing this organizationally, right? Is the very nature of doing it for an organization means we have to create some formality. There has to be some process.
Yeah.
Involved, but a real mentorship is not, it's a relationship. It's not a formal procedure. And there are certainly best practices and structures we can put in place in an organization that support it. But how a lot of organizations tackle it, I think, is a little backwards. And the way you're describing it, with the dating metaphor, is a really good one, right? Instead of creating a Match.com where people have a lot of control over who they're getting connected to and what they're looking for, they just throw people together. They do sort of your mom as matchmaker, like, oh, I know a nice girl and you're going to go on a date with her. And you're like, oh my gosh. So yeah. Then people get stuck together, and no surprise that the attrition rate is really high in those formats, where people meet a couple times and they go, I'm not getting value out of this, or this guy never calls me back, or we don't talk about what I want to talk about, or personality conflicts. So when we make it too formal, I think that's one of the most common stumbling blocks.
It looks like that kind of speaks to this next question that got voted up the second highest. If I want a mentor, how do I go about getting one if there is no formal program in place?
Yeah, so this is a question that I get asked a lot by students. So I do some teaching at Marquette University here in town, and a lot of my students will, juniors and seniors or grad students, and they'll come up and say, like, how do I get a mentor? Or in our early career HiPo programs, same thing. Like, how do I ask somebody to be my mentor is actually one that I get a lot.
Right.
And the first thing I say is, you don't. That's weird. Don't just walk up to somebody and say, oh, will you be my mentor? Most likely you already have someone who is mentoring you. It just hasn't been recognized in that sort of official capacity. And it frankly doesn't need to, right? So what I'll say is, if you have someone in your network that you go to once a month or more for advice, or to bounce ideas off of, or to ask a question, and they've got a little more experience than you, or a different skill set than you, and you trust that person to give you that advice, that's a mentor, right? And it may not be a formal mentor relationship that's been acknowledged by both of you, but that's what's happening. And so you don't need to necessarily formalize it for it to be just as useful. But in terms of if you don't have anyone like that in your network, how do you go find it? That's a little trickier of a proposition, right? Then at that point, we need to know what your goals are for the mentoring relationship. Are you trying to develop your career? Or is this more big picture life mentoring, right? Do you want to open up to this person about some struggles you're having in your broader life, or priorities, where you want to go with your life? That's a little different, right? So I like Marco's comment here. There is a difference between advice and mentoring, but I think the difference is really just about frequency and consistency. A mentor is just someone with more experience who you trust, that you go to for that advice and insight on a consistent basis over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had people call me their mentor in the past, and I had no idea.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know I was doing it. But so I hope I'm doing a good job.
Nice. Oh, look, there's one right there, Craig.
Oh yeah. Well, awesome. Hey, thanks, Craig.
Yeah. So I think there's sort of a line we can cross, though, once we acknowledge that this is intentional in both directions. Because if you're doing it unintentionally, that's great, right? And it's evolved naturally in that way. But then if you can take that next step and say, okay, now I also choose this as the mentor, and I'm going to be intentional and thoughtful about it. Now you can engage all these best practices and do an even better job than you were doing organically. It's kind of like how a lot of us got into training and development, right? You start out and if you didn't get formally educated in learning, which frankly a lot of people in training didn't, you go out and just figure it out. You stumble through it. And then later, maybe you go back and take courses or, do a certification or whatever. And you learn all this language and all these frameworks and all these things. And frequently it makes you much better, or at least gives you a different tool set to do what you had already been doing. But now it feels natural because you intuited your way into it, but now you know how.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. I guess that's why I always tend to relate it to just having relationships with people that you have something in common with. It just always seems so valuable to me. I always enjoy, I guess we're calling it reverse mentorship these days, but I love chatting with folks that do come out of the degree programs and they're just fresh and green and they just don't have any idea what they're getting into, but they're so excited and so driven, and they're fresh out of a master's program somewhere, and they're just super excited, and it's fun to talk to them because they get me excited about the industry again. When we're in it for so long, it's easy to become kind of the old curmudgeon and get skeptical about things, and and I don't know, not be as into it anymore. So I love chatting with those young folks. They keep me mentored up pretty well.
Yeah. Well, the research actually shows that folks who do mentoring reap a lot of benefits. So not only do they have higher levels of career satisfaction, but they're learning new skills, they're advancing more quickly in their careers, just like folks who have mentors. So there's actually great research on the value of mentoring on both sides. Just quickly to Marco's point here, I do agree, Marco, that the relationship does need to be a little formal. So these sort of unintentional mentoring relationships that spring up can have value. They're not worthless. But until we know and acknowledge, like, we're doing this, it's hard to really put the right kind of effort in. It's sort of like, again, we can draw this sort of romantic metaphor a lot, but it's sort of like being in the friend zone for one person where the other person's really into you, and you just don't realize it. Like, nothing's going to come of that, and it's going to be frustrating and awkward at times, maybe because the expectations are different. So once we can get our expectations level, now you can really be intentional and move the needle. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, let me jump back and get to some more of these questions, because there's lots of them in here popping in, which is great. Thank you, guys. Keep it up. But I want to jump in and address Kim's long question here. So psychologists have long recognized the phenomenon of late bloomers, but businesses seem to only look for HiPos. So high performing organizations, I think.
Probably high potential talent.
High potentials. That's it. Yeah. So among their 20-something recruits, we learn about recruiters' prerogatives from ATD, if nowhere else. Do you see this ever changing, especially with the way people change jobs so often these days? It seems like age shouldn't matter as much as it did when an employee's whole career was with one company.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good point, and it's one that we stumbled through a few years back. So again, we do a lot of this sort of high potential development work. And one of the things that's really interesting is different organizations use that term really differently. So if you go into an organization like Harley, who's right in our backyard, when they say HiPo, they mean experienced managers who are getting ready to step into a director level or higher. So in another organization, a HiPo is somebody 3 years out of college who's getting ready to step into their first management position. And everybody does it a little differently. Some have publicly or sort of public HiPo programs where everybody knows you're in the program and you've been tagged. Some are secret, where even the talent themselves don't know that they're a high potential, right? It's all behind closed doors talked about. But anyway, so when we started building some of our HiPo programs that are outside of companies where we run our own, we promoted them as high potential programs. And that's when we stumbled into this whole language problem, because companies were registering very different people for a program that we thought was targeted like this, and everybody was interpreting it differently. And so we've rotated through all kinds of different ways of saying this: high potential, early career, leader, all kinds of things. And what we kind of settled on ends up being this long, involved definition that we really have to take time and explain to people, because it really is about your level of experience leading others. It's not about how much time you've spent in industry. It's not about how much time you've spent in that company. But, because different fields have different sort of journeys to management. If you're in retail, you might land in your first management role a year out of school, with almost no experience in the industry. If you're in tech, it might take a long time before you're ever leading people. Or in other fields, you might work for 20 years before an opportunity comes up for you to, quote, be a manager. So yeah, I think it is an important point. Do I see companies recognizing it? Unfortunately, no. I still think most companies that we work with, when they talk high potential, they're looking at early career, and in their mind, they're talking about millennials. In fact, I see those two get interchanged a lot. And so usually we're the ones pumping the brakes going, well, that's not the only people you should be looking at for this kind of development. Right?
Yeah, it's weird. I would think that high potential would have different levels to it, right? Like you said, some organizations use that term at one level or another, but I don't see why you couldn't use that term just across the board, but have different levels for it, right? Like you've got HiPos that are, recent college grads, and then you've got HiPos that are, directors looking to become executives. You've got first level managers that are HiPos looking to become second level managers or directors or whatnot. And, everybody at every level could be identified as high potential. But one of the things that I always misunderstood was how they define potential, and what kind of the politics of it that I learned very, very quickly at Intel was it wasn't necessarily how good you were at your job or how well you knew what was supposed to be done. It was more how well you knew how to navigate within the business, how well you could how well you jumped through all the hoops, basically, right? Did you fill out your daily or your weekly, reports, and did you get it to the right people, and did you follow all of the processes to the letter? That then that's the HiPo. Those people, wow, they're like they're going through the motions, they're doing all the stuff, not necessarily what the end output is. Kind of similar to how we have a tendency to bash our own work that we do in training. It's like we should be more interested in the outcome and that sort of performance level management, as opposed to just, are they doing all the right activities?
Yeah, this is a conversation that I have with a couple other learning geeks in town over beers a lot. Like what is potential? Because this 9-box gets used and misused a lot. We're really good now at performance. I think it's very easy to go, well, this person hits their KPIs or they outperform their peers. So that axis is easy. But when we start talking about potential, like I like Kim's comment here, it ends up being a lot about personality, compatibility. Like, do I like you? Are you our kind of person? Are you a culture fit? And there's nothing wrong with culture fit.
Yeah.
But is that really the same as potential? So my friend Guillermo, who works for Baird, talks about this a lot. And one of the things he always reminds people of is that part of potential is desire also. So it's not enough to just say, well, I think they have the potential to be a leader. Do they want to be a leader?
Yeah.
Not everybody wants that track. So 2 years ago in one of our HiPo cohorts in town here, at our graduation, I invite some of the students up to speak to the group, and their supervisors are there and all this. And I don't vet their comments in advance, which is rolling the dice, I realize. But one of these guys gets up from a big company here in town, and he says, the best thing I learned in this management development program is that I don't want to be a manager. and everyone kind of goes, whoa. But we talked about it right afterwards, and I said, well, that's actually great. What a great outcome for a leadership development program, for you to have this realization that you want to focus on the technical track of your career before you end up in a management position and hating it, or getting shoved into middle management because you're a high performer without considering that potential side of it and the desire piece of that potential.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and I just have to give kudos to Paul for sharing his experience with that as well, because that's kind of that's what I fell into when Intel was basically, it wasn't my first official full-time gig, but it was my first long good one that was that I stuck out for a long time. But I had the same thing where it was just like I still felt like I was trying to cut my teeth on how to do the work, right, and how to practice and get done. And I actually really enjoyed it, and I loved geeking out on the tech. But what I also learned is that you need somebody within those large, Fortune 500 companies that can partner with you, that can balance you out. Like, you can be really technical and you can run down that road, but in the enterprise, if you don't have a mentor at that level that's good at the people stuff and the management stuff, and that can help you, the ideas that you have and the great work that you do can never get exposed, because at the end of the day, you can't do, you shouldn't say you can't, but it's difficult to be great at both. You can't, doing the work, being innovative on the tech side or the development side or the design side, whatever piece of the puzzle you're focusing on, and doing the individual contributor work, you need somebody else to just kind of be your champion too. And that's that manager that, you have to partner with. A lot of great projects that I worked on that had great ROI ended up just dropping off, and they didn't fail. They just stopped being supported because the manager or whoever that was driving it moved on to another management job in another org, and then it just kind of died because there wasn't anybody there to champion it, because I was busy coding it and developing it and designing it and all that kind of stuff. So it's a long way around of saying that I think there's a lot of important teamwork aspects to just being an employee, and sometimes that's your mentor and your coach, and other times it's just a champion.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. And when it can be easy to get trapped in a narrow definition of potential that's based on our own self-perception, right? I look at the world the way I look at the world. And so I'm trying to identify this sort of murky idea of potential by looking for people that match me, right? Especially because I'm a manager. So in my head, well, what got me here and what makes me good at managing is the same thing that will make someone else good at managing, which is not correct. There are lots of ways to be a good manager, just like there's lots of ways to be a good mentor. So there's not just one kind of person who's good at mentoring. There's not just one skill set for mentors. There are lots of different kinds of mentors. Actually, I want to just make a quick comment about, I don't know if it was Kim or Bethany asked about the culture fit piece and can it be coached?
Oh yeah.
So I just around this with a manufacturing company here in town, and so they launched a cultural behaviors initiative, basically. So they defined their values and they narrowed them down to valued behaviors. And so the thought was, can we coach people to align with these cultural values? And so I think the answer is, as with most consultants, the answer is it depends, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can coach people out of their core values, right? What I value at the core of who I am, does that match up with what the company values or what they say they value?
Right.
But sometimes you can coach people through a change in perspective, right? Maybe to understand the cultural values as something more than just words on a wall, or posters or whatever, and to really get how they connect to your life and your job. And so we can help make that connection and coach to that. But I don't think you can coach somebody out of their deeply held belief that integrity matters. Not that would be a part of your corporate values. Like, let's scrub that out. But but I think that's the line, right? We can reframe for people and help them see and understand better the values that exist, but you're not going to be able to align things that are truly not aligned.
Yep. Yeah. Let me jump in. And so Bethany has a question down here, and I realize I'm skipping some of the other ones, but there's a lot of 2 votes here. So I'm going to skip down to Bethany's because I think we've answered some of the other ones. But she says, even if mentorship is a relationship, how do you make it valuable for both people, the mentor and the mentee? So we've kind of brushed on this and we've talked about it, and we've stated that there are some specific things you can do, but let's dig a little deeper. What does that look like? How do you make it valuable for both?
So I think it starts, as many things do, with 2 things, a little bit of skill development and a plan. So very few organizations support their mentors with training in what mentoring is. And so just like we're having this conversation about what's a mentor, what's a coach, what's a manager, what do mentors do, what do they not do, best practices, that kind of thing. That stuff is not intuitive for every manager. There are plenty of people in your organization that will volunteer to be a mentor and have no idea what that actually means or what that looks like.
Yeah.
And mentees need a little training too, I think. What are the expectations for you as a mentee? What are the resources that are available to you? What should you expect out of your mentor if this is a little bit more formal of a program, right? They need the rules of the road. At the same time, I want to caution against one of the other stumbles that I see a lot in formal mentoring programs, and actually in our world overall, which is lots of companies like to say this line, we let our employees drive their career, right? or in the case of the mentoring, they say, we let the mentee drive the relationship. And I'm going to be really brutal here. All that means is you're giving mentors or managers an excuse to divest themselves of the responsibility.
Yeah.
So, I don't have to call my mentee. I don't have to email my mentee because they're driving the relationship. So if I haven't heard from them, they must not need me. Or I don't have to develop my employees because they drive their career. So if they need something to get to the next level, they'll come to me.
Yeah, the phrase I've heard is our employees own their own employability.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that in principle, but really it needs to be mutual ownership, right? That's like me saying, oh, my wife owns our relationship. So I don't have to actually do anything for her until she asks me. Right? If she wants flowers, she'll tell me. If she wants me to do the dishes, she'll tell me. If she doesn't, I'm good. It's got to be mutual.
That's an excellent reminder for me today, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, anniversary or something? Boy. Well, so the other piece then is the mentoring plan. And I think this is really critical, right? Just as the organization needs to set some expectations for what the organization wants to get out of this, the mentor and the mentee have to sit down together early and agree on some expectations. What are we hoping to accomplish? In both directions. What do we expect to invest in this? And some real talk is important here, right? If the mentor is just thinking, well, once a month we'll grab coffee, and the mentee is thinking, I want to be able to walk into your office at any time and bounce something off of you, or I want to text you about a challenge I'm having and get a response the same day. Or I'm expecting you to, say nice things about me in a career development meeting, or help me navigate my relationship with my boss, right? Yep. We need to get that out on the table early, or again, it's like putting two people in a relationship and having very different expectations of what they want out of it. So frequency of communication, what that communication is going to be about, check-in times throughout the relationship, and need to talk about what an end strategy looks like. So I think a lot of people, this is where mentoring and romantic relationships differ a little bit. I do think you want to talk about the exit strategy, right? Yeah. What does it look like for this relationship to end? Because I shouldn't probably mentor you forever. Or at least my mentoring relationship is going to evolve a lot over the course of time. And so we need to know, like, what are the milestones?
From my hand, it will be time for you to leave.
Yeah, right.
Grasshopper.
Exactly. So like I have a really powerful mentor in my life who's been mentoring me since high school. He was my marketing teacher in high school. And he's still somebody I consider a mentor, but our relationship has radically changed over the course of, gosh, how long have I been out of high school now? A lot of years. So when I went away to college, the relationship stayed very similar because I was still a student and I was still bouncing ideas off of him about where I wanted to go. But then when I got a little bit into my career, there was a point where our relationship kind of flipped. Suddenly I had some expertise that he didn't have. He was trying to set up a mentoring program in a school that he was now the principal of. And he brought me in to consult on that. And I gave him some advice. And we kind of had this weird moment where we looked at each other and he was like, you just gave me really useful advice. And I was like, I know, did that feel weird? And he was like, a little bit, but it's really cool. He's like, that's very exciting, that now it's flipped a little. And over the years, it's continued to evolve, right? And so as my life changes and his life changes, our mentoring relationship changes, but we've had these milestones along the way that we've talked about to say like, well, now it's different. Let's acknowledge that. What does the relationship look like now? So I think with a clearly defined plan and with a little bit of prep and practice in advance, most mentoring relationships are a lot more successful. Some of the tactical pieces for mentors, if we want to talk about best practices. So one is, I think, not overcommitting. So where most mentor relationships die is the mentor gets busy and this is not a priority. And so they underinvest time and the mentee gets frustrated and the relationship starts to devolve. Yep. So part of the problem then comes from mentors overcommitting. So I might say, well, I'm mentoring everyone on my team. I've got 8 reports and I'm mentoring them all. Well, no, you're not. You're at least not well. Yeah. There's no way.
You may be their manager and you may manage the department, but you're definitely not mentoring them all.
Right. So what can you actually take on and be good at, right? Got to accept that. Another piece is you want to have some kind of curriculum involved in your plan, right? So when we talk about what is our plan, what do I want to accomplish? Well, next step is action. What does that actually look like? So this is where the mentor really becomes a development person, right? What are the KSAs that this person needs to develop to close the gap for where they want to go? And can you be an intentional driver of that for them, connecting them to resources, maybe teaching them yourself, but maybe just guiding them to people who can teach them. Craig, I love the Jedi reference. We are,
we've got a lot of sci-fi geeks in this group, so you're right. You feel right at home.
Yeah. So I often use the analogy, right? Like Yoda is the mentor, Obi-Wan was the coach, right? And he didn't do such a hot job, it turns out, but it is all about like next steps, right? So you got to be willing to put in the time. You got to know what the time is. You have to have some really clear, actionable things. What am I going to do as a mentor? It is not a passive. If you're doing it well and intentionally, it shouldn't be a passive process where I just wait until somebody comes to ask me a question. You're not a guru on the mountain. You're maybe like a parent who lives far, a parent to an adult child. Right? You still care. You're still really invested in their success. You're still going to reach out from time to time, and they're going to reach out to you from time to time. You're not with them every single day, like their manager or their coach, but you're actively engaged in what they're trying to accomplish.
Wouldn't a little bit of the value come from, and this is probably more effective coming from the mentor, not the coach, but pushing some boundaries a little bit. Right. Yeah. And, you know, obviously you have to have a level of trust with the relationship first, but the mentor should be able to ask the really tough questions, you know, mm-hmm. Hey, you know, oh, you think you did a good job at that? Do you really think you did a good job at that? Could you have done it better? You know, or was it really their fault? You know, did you have anything to do with that? I kind of feel like I'm sounding like I'm talking to my kids now, but
well,
but I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of trying to think it through. Do you ever make that as part of the coaching? Like, hey, you know, it's, you know, in teaching mentors, wouldn't that be a good like tactical element of it too? Like just, you know, lots of questioning.
Absolutely, and Dana said it earlier, and Kim's right on it. This is where the mentor as a coach, those coaching tools become really important, right? So if one of my interventions to help you develop is to help you reflect on things that you're accomplishing, right? You just completed that project that you've been struggling through. Now let's sit down and really dig into it and reflect on it. I'm going to use a lot of coaching skills in that conversation. Asking why not, what went wrong, you know, digging into that. I think you need to use those tools, and it's better to ask. And this is coaching 101, right? Craig just mentioned it too. Like, you don't want to spoon feed. That's another place where a lot of mentors, I think, drop the ball, where they just tell you the answer. Right, because they want to give you the path of least resistance to being successful, and it's coming from a good place. But you need to let them stumble a little bit. So like, I have two little boys, a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old, and my 8-month-old, God help me, is going to be walking any minute. But he's at this stage where you walk around and he's holding the pinkies, you know, and so you're bent over and your back is sore and he wants to walk everywhere with the pinkies. Well, that's great, and he loves that, but at some point you got to take the pinkies away. Yeah. Right. And because if you don't, it'll stifle his growth. And it's the same thing with your mentor-mentee relationship. Like, if you give them everything, if you clear the path for their career and you give them all the cake projects that are really easy, and you make everything easy for them, then they don't actually grow. You do have to get in and do what you're talking about and push a little, challenge people for that long-term growth. Because again, the mentor has the long-term perspective. They care about the human you're going to be 10 years from now. They don't just care about you succeeding today or getting this quarter's merit bonus. You know, they got to think long term.
Yeah, and then that to go along with that is, you know, there's the pushing and the asking the tough questions, which might cause a little bit of conflict. But then on the flip side, there is the need for, you know, some motivation and helping them see the things in them that maybe they don't see. And I think a lot of times what I've experienced and what I've heard from others is that when mentors are just kind of going through the motions and just, you know, scheduling the 30-minute meeting or whatever and checking all the boxes. Yes, we talked about all the projects that they're doing and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, for them to stop, at least the best ones, my favorite ones, push really hard on the edges, but also say, you know what, you're really good at this. And I know you don't think you're good at it, but you know, you're really good at that, or you know, you've got potential in this space, you just don't work at it very hard, or because you're shy, or because you're introverted, or whatever. You're not, you know, let's, you know, for the mentor to identify things that I think are either hard for the mentee to talk about, or maybe just they don't even know, it doesn't even occur to them, it's just sort of a natural thing that they do, and they don't even realize that it's like a valuable thing in a business. And you know, for people to identify that, I think it goes a lot deeper than just checking the boxes.
Well, and this is where trust becomes such a critical component of this, and why I always refer to mentoring as a relationship, because you can't do what you're talking about if you don't have a solid trust-based relationship. In other words, if I don't have credibility in your eyes, then it doesn't matter if I'm giving you feedback, good or bad. If you don't believe you're good at something, and I tell you I think you're good at something, I better have incredible credibility in your eyes to sort of override your negative self-perception. If you've ever tried to convince someone that they're good at something when they don't believe they are, boy, they better really believe in you. Yeah. Because you're trying to override their own identity, their own self-perception. And that's really tough. So mentors have to front load the relationship work, and you still have to have some of the technical, you know, I'm working on your career, helping you with this skill, because mentees want to feel that progress right away. They want some quick wins. Yeah. But really, the relationship has got to be front loaded. If I don't get that established first, then I don't have the ability, the leverage to do some of those things that you're talking about.
Yeah. So let me, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to be able to wrap up and be sure to let people know, you know, where they can find you and all that kind of stuff. But I've specifically saved this question to the end because I don't want it to fall down a rat hole it might cause some issues. But where do you stand when it comes to this mentoring and coaching stuff on things like what Bethany is talking about, or either what is your color, or what is your MBTI profile, or what is your Myers-Briggs, or that is the MBTI. What are some of the other ones? Like, do DISC you encourage that kind of stuff? Is that a part of it? You know, what's your thought in that space?
So people love this stuff, and I don't have a problem with that. And so if you're diehard DISC or whatever, DISC, you know, pick your poison. My thing is, we, like anything in our industry, we just have to remember that these are just tools. Yeah. And so used for a little information and as the basis to kick off a discussion, I think they're great. When the pendulum swings too far and they become the way or the primary way that we match mentors and mentees, or select people for projects, or hire, then I think we've jumped the shark a little bit. So like, there's an organization that we worked with a few years ago who went all in on DISC, to the point where they literally had made every single person print out their DISC profile and post it outside their cubicle, so that when you walked up to talk to them about something, you could go, oh, strong D, low S, let me approach you this way. I literally can't even. So it's got to be used appropriately, right? Use it to give you a little more information, in the same way that I can get information just by having a conversation with you. But it should be a conversation starter, not a metric. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to tie a nice little bow around that. Thank you. I knew
Sure.
we were going to have to talk about it, so I didn't want it to divulge into a lot of um, this one's better than that one, and I don't like
Yeah.
them, and the science says
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
all that. But it's good. You're right. I mean, I always find them curious, and interesting to know. And of course, they change over time and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
anyways, hey Matt, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's definitely a good time. So, if people want to know more about mentoring and coaching and what you guys do, what's the best way for folks to find you?
I would say start on our website, focustrainingpro.com. Certainly hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to be connected with all of you. And we're based in Milwaukee, so if you're ever out here and want to grab a beer, hit me up.
Yeah, fantastic. I don't know how often I'll ever get to Milwaukee, but if you got a Harley Davidson, headquarters there, that might be a good enough excuse to go.
Yeah. And a museum. You can hop on some pretty cool bikes.
Some old Harleys. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much again. This was fantastic. Let's get you on the calendar and do it again sometime. This looked like a hot topic, so it's definitely something that we're all dealing with. So good stuff. I'm going to close out the video, but you'll still be sort of in this world. I'm just going to have some closing remarks, and we'll wrap up the show. Sound good?
Bye, everyone.
All right. Hey, everybody. That was Matt Meuleners and talking about coaching and mentoring today. And it is actually, since today's Wednesday, today's team day, it actually fits in kind of nicely for our team day, really. I mean, do you mentor? Do you coach? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a coach? It was, it's, how do you step up and formalize it? If we look to each other as mentors in certain areas and things like that, maybe the next step is maybe how do we put a little bit of formal structure around it and get some different support? I don't know, but I like to think of TLD chat is a really great way to get some good coaching and good mentoring from colleagues and peers. So I think of all of you as my coaches and mentors in the most informal way possible. Now, I guess to follow Matt's advice, I need to step it up and maybe put a little bit of formalization around it. Maybe, I don't know. But it's such a great thing to think about, Matt. Thanks again for being here and chatting with us about it. Hey, everybody, hit them up at focustrainingpro.com and learn more about what it is that they can do for your organization, or ask Matt all the hard questions if you want to be a mentor or a mentee. So that is it for TLD Chat today. Be sure to become a member. If you're getting value out of this, which I know most of you are, I think everybody does, get a little bit of value out of it. If today was worth $1 to you, then it's definitely worth jumping in and just becoming a member, because that's about what it equates to in doing the membership, is just $1 a day for all of this fantastic value in the conversations. So it's all fantastic and good fun. So yes, yeah, Kim says perhaps an activity at the conference. Yes, I think we do actually have an activity planned with my management leadership friends, Bill and Michelle, that were at TLDC 16. They're going to be coming back and sharing with us some of the stuff that the projects that they've done and the things that they have learned from those projects since we last talked to them. So we're definitely looking forward to that as well. So we definitely are going to be talking about this at TLDC 18 coming up January 29th and 30th in lovely Phoenix, Arizona. And I would love to see you all there. And I would love to give you all a discount on the already super effective and value driven registration. But become a member and just wrap it all up into one small purchase for you, and get that all taken care of, because it is definitely a good time. I love being a part of this community. I love hanging out with you guys. I love hearing all the work that you do and learning from you as well. So I will bid you all adieu. Everybody have a great and fantastic day today, and we will be back here tomorrow for Thursday. And what's our date? We'll be talking with our special guests, and I don't know why we just keep booking people with names I cannot pronounce, but I think David Charney, I can probably do that one, but I'm sorry, but I'm not even going to be able to go near the other one today. So tomorrow, the 28th, Thursday, we do have two fantastic guests, but I'll let you guys look them up and figure out how to pronounce the names, and that will be the mystery surprise for tomorrow. So anyways, you guys are awesome. Thanks for hanging out today. We will see you tomorrow on TLD Chat.